In the summer of 1749, the Royal Society of London received a mathematical proof so elegant, so revolutionary, that it promised to unlock the fundamental nature of reality itself. The theorem was presented by Professor Edmund Carlisle of Cambridge, a brilliant mathematician who claimed to have discovered the equation that governed all existence. Within 3 weeks, everyone who read the proof was dead. Not from poison, not from disease, from understanding. Because some knowledge, once learned, cannot be unlearned. Some truths, once seen, destroy the mind that perceives them. The Royal Society sealed the proof in a lead box and buried it beneath the foundations of their building. It remains there to this day. But I have found Professor Carlisle's journals. I have reconstructed his work. I have seen the equation. And now I understand why they all died screaming. What you are about to hear is my final testimony, recorded as my own mind begins to unravel. If you value your sanity, stop listening now, because mathematics is not just the language of the universe. It is the universe, and we were never meant to read it fluently. London, England, May 1749. My name is Dr. James Whitmore, Fellow of the Royal Society and devoted student of natural philosophy. I write this account while my faculties remain intact, though I fear that state shall not persist much longer. It began, as all great tragedies do, with the highest of intentions. Professor Edmund Carlisle was the most brilliant mathematician of our age. At merely 32 years, he had already revolutionized the calculus, expanded Newton's Principia, and made discoveries in geometry that defied the understanding of lesser minds. He was Cambridge's brightest ornament, the Royal Society's most celebrated member, and my dearest friend. We often met at the coffee houses of London to discuss philosophy, mathematics, and the grand project of the Enlightenment, the systematic application of reason to understand all of creation. Edmund believed, as we all did, that the universe operated according to rational principles, divine machinery that could be comprehended through mathematics. God is a geometer, he would say, stirring his coffee with that peculiar intensity that marked all his movements. The heavens move according to equations. Matter obeys mathematical laws. Why should we not discover the master equation, the single proof that encompasses all others? I confess I found his ambition admirable, if somewhat grandiose. Newton had revealed the mathematics of motion. Leibniz had given us the calculus. What more fundamental truth could there be to discover? Everything, James, Edmund replied when I voiced this skepticism. We have scratched the surface. We have learned the alphabet. But we have not yet read the sentence, the complete thought of the divine mind expressed in perfect mathematical language. This conversation occurred on the 14th of May, 1749. I remember the date precisely because it was the last time I saw Edmund Carlisle as a sane man. 3 days later, he sent me a letter. The handwriting was erratic, the paper stained with what appeared to be coffee, or perhaps tears. James, I have found it. The theorem. The proof. It came to me in a dream of such clarity, such terrible clarity. I have spent 3 days confirming it, checking every step, searching for errors. There are none. It is perfect. It is true.
And it is horrifying.
I must share this discovery with the society, though God help me, I wish I had never glimpsed it. Meet me at the Royal Society on Friday. I shall present my findings. Bring your strongest wine, dear friend. We shall need it. I arrived at the Royal Society on that Friday evening to find the lecture hall filled beyond capacity. Word had spread of Edmund's promised revelation. Every mathematician, natural philosopher, and curious gentleman of London seemed to be in attendance. Edmund stood at the lectern, looking haggard. His usually immaculate wig sat askew. His eyes, bloodshot and wide, darted about the room as if tracking movements invisible to the rest of us. Gentlemen, he began, his voice hoarse. I have discovered a mathematical truth of such profound significance that it will revolutionize not merely our understanding of nature, but our very perception of existence itself. A murmur of excitement rippled through the audience. What I am about to share with you is not merely a theorem. It is a key that unlocks the deepest chamber of reality. But I must warn you. He paused, gripping the lectern until his knuckles whitened. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed. Some knowledge, once gained, transforms the knower forever. Sir William Thornbury, president of the society, chuckled indulgently. Come now, Professor Carlyle. You speak as if mathematics were sorcery. Show us this grand discovery of yours. Edmund's hands trembled as he turned to the blackboard and began to write. At first, it appeared to be ordinary mathematical notation. Greek letters, integral signs, elegant equations flowing from his chalk. But as he continued writing, filling board after board with increasingly complex proofs, something began to feel wrong. The symbols started to arrange themselves in patterns that seemed to pulse and shift at the edge of vision. The logic was flawless. I could follow each step, yet the conclusion toward which the proof inexorably moved filled me with a crawling dread I could not articulate. You see, Edmund said, his voice rising with a manic edge. Each step follows from the previous, with perfect necessity. The proof is irrefutable. And the conclusion. Oh God, the conclusion. He completed the final line with a flourish, then stepped back, staring at his work with an expression of absolute horror. The room fell silent as every mind present worked through the logic, traced the elegant chain of reasoning, arrived at the inescapable conclusion. And then the screaming began. Sir William Thornbury was the first to truly comprehend. He stood abruptly, his face draining of color, pointing at the blackboard with a shaking finger. No, he whispered. No, that cannot be. If that is true, then everything we perceive, everything we believe to be real, is merely a shadow, Edmund finished quietly. A projection. A dream occurring within a mathematical construct that has no independent existence. Blasphemy, someone shouted. But the word lacked conviction. We could all see the proof, could all follow the logic, and the logic was perfect. Dr. Reginald Blackwood, our foremost expert in natural philosophy, had gone very still in his seat. His eyes had glazed over, staring at nothing. Or perhaps at everything, seeing for the first time what the equations revealed. The theorem proves, Edmund continued, though his voice cracked with emotion, that consciousness itself is a mathematical inevitability. That we, our thoughts, our sensations, our very sense of selfhood, are nothing more than patterns of information resolving themselves according to purely logical principles. There is no soul, no divine spark. We are simply permutations, calculations running their course in an infinite equation. But surely, I interjected, desperate to find some flaw, some escape from this conclusion, surely the very fact that we can comprehend such a theorem demonstrates the existence of mind, of consciousness separate from mere mechanism. Does it? Edmund turned those terrible eyes upon me. Or does it simply prove that the mechanism is sufficiently complex to model itself? A mirror reflecting a mirror reflecting a mirror, with nothing of substance at the center? Lady Margaret Ashford, one of the few women of learning permitted to attend our lectures, stood up shakily. I must leave, she said. I feel as though I am dissolving. As though my thoughts are not my own but merely echoes of. She never finished the sentence. Her eyes rolled back in her head, and she collapsed. Chaos erupted. Men rushed to aid Lady Ashford, but several of them were already exhibiting similar symptoms. Dr. Blackwood remained frozen in his seat, perfectly still, his breathing so shallow he might have been a wax figure. Edmund watched it all with a terrible calm. You see? The knowledge has a weight. Once you truly understand, once you fully internalize what the proof demonstrates about the nature of your own existence, the mind begins to collapse under the contradiction. You know you are real because you think, yet you also know, with mathematical certainty, that your thinking is merely a deterministic process, no more meaningful than water flowing downhill. This is madness, Sir William declared. Mathematical proofs do not drive men insane. You have made an error, Carlyle. Your reasoning is flawed. Then find the flaw, Edmund said softly. He gestured to the boards. Every step is there. Every assumption clearly stated. Every logical connection pristine. Find the error, William.
Please.
I beg you, because if you cannot, then we must accept the truth. We are not philosophers discovering reality. We are reality discovering itself. And the discovery is driving us mad, because we were never meant to know. I approached the blackboard, determined to find the mistake, the subtle sleight of logic that would unravel the entire proof. I studied each line, checked every transformation, verified each conclusion. And with each step, my sense of self began to fragment. The proof was perfect. Absolutely, terribly perfect. And the more clearly I understood it, the less real I felt. The Royal Society meeting was adjourned in chaos. Lady Ashford was carried away by footmen, still unconscious. Dr. Blackwood had to be physically removed from his seat, unresponsive and staring. 3 other gentlemen exhibited symptoms of severe distress, trembling, incoherent speech, and inability to recognize their own reflections in the hall's mirrors. I helped Edmund gather his papers, noting with alarm how his hands shook so violently he could barely grasp the sheets. You should not have revealed this, I told him quietly. Whatever truth you have discovered, it is not meant for human minds to bear. But it is the truth, he replied. How can we, devotees of reason and enlightenment, turn away from truth merely because it discomforts us? Is that not the very obscurantism we have sworn to fight? There is a difference between discomfort and destruction, Edmund. Look what your theorem has done to these men. They will recover, he insisted, though his voice lacked certainty. Once the initial shock passes, they will adjust. They will. A scream interrupted him. We turned to see Lord Pemberton, a respected mathematician, clawing at his own face. I can feel it, he shrieked. I can feel the equation running. I am not thinking, I am being thought. I am a proof proving itself. Make it stop. Please God, make it stop. It took 4 men to restrain him. Over the following days, reports reached me of the other attendees. Lady Ashford had awakened, but could not recognize her own children, claiming that she knew the truth of their non-existence. Dr. Blackwood remained catatonic, occasionally mumbling mathematical formulas in his sleep. Lord Pemberton had been confined to Bedlam, where he spent his days writing the proof over and over on the walls of his cell with his own blood. And Edmund? Edmund had locked himself in his Cambridge rooms and refused all visitors, until he sent for me on the 9th day. I found him in a state of shocking deterioration. His once elegant chambers were in chaos, papers scattered everywhere, candles burned to stumps, the remains of uneaten meals growing mold in corners. And the walls. Dear God, the walls. He had covered every surface with mathematics. Equations spiraled across the wallpaper, crawled up to the ceiling, descended to the floorboards. The same proof, written again and again in increasingly frantic handwriting, with elaborations, extensions, corollaries that branched off in ever more disturbing directions. James, he said, and his voice was hollow, empty of all the passion that had once animated it. I have continued the work. The initial theorem was only the beginning. There are implications, you see. Terrible implications. Edmund, you must stop this. The proof has poisoned your mind. Poisoned. He laughed, and the sound was like breaking glass.
No.
It has clarified. I see now with perfect clarity. The theorem does not merely describe reality, it creates it. By understanding the equation, we collapse the probability function of our own existence. We force ourselves into a singular state, that of knowing we do not exist. I tried to lead him away from his scribblings, but he pulled free with surprising strength. Listen to me. This is important. The more people who understand the proof, the more reality itself begins to unravel. We are not discovering a pre-existing truth. We are retroactively destroying the foundation upon which we stand. That is logically impossible. Is it? His eyes blazed with a mad light. You speak of logic, as if it were a fixed framework. But the proof demonstrates that logic itself is contingent, arbitrary. The universe could have operated under entirely different mathematical principles. We just happen to exist in one where consciousness can emerge and contemplate its own impossibility. But that contemplation creates a paradox, a recursive loop. The observer observing the observation, observing the observer. He pressed his hands to his temples, groaning. Do you see it, James? We are caught in an infinite regress. Every thought we have about the theorem becomes part of the theorem. We cannot think our way out because thinking is the problem. Consciousness is the problem. We're the problem. I tried to reason with him, to pull him back from the abyss into which his mind had fallen. But the more we discussed the proof, the more clearly I understood it. And the more clearly I understood it, the less real everything became. My own thoughts began to feel scripted, predetermined. I would think something and immediately question whether I had chosen to think it, or whether it was simply the next necessary step in an equation that had been running since the beginning of time. When I looked at my hands, they seemed translucent, unreal, like mathematical constructs made temporarily solid by force of will. We must destroy the proof, I said finally. Burn your papers. Strike it from the record. Ensure that no one else is infected by this knowledge. Edmund shook his head sadly. Too late. I sent copies to colleagues in Paris, in Vienna, in Edinburgh. I wanted to share the discovery, you see, before I understood what it would do. How many? 17 letters. To 17 of the finest minds in Europe. I felt my blood turn to ice. Edmund, what have you done? I have proven, he said quietly, that the Enlightenment was our undoing. We sought to understand everything through reason. And now we have succeeded. We understand. And understanding has destroyed us. Over the next month, reports began to arrive from across Europe. Professor Jean-Baptiste Laurent of the Académie des Sciences in Paris had locked himself in the observatory and was found 3 days later, having calculated and recalculated the proof obsessively. He claimed he could see the mathematics underlying reality, see the equations governing the movement of every particle. I am trapped in the clockwork, his letter to the Academy stated. I can see the gears turning, feel myself being processed through the mechanism of causality. There is no escape. There is only the eternal grinding of logic devouring itself. He threw himself from the observatory tower on the 4th night. In Vienna, Dr. Klaus Reinhardt began exhibiting stranger symptoms. After reading Edmund's proof, he claimed that he could perceive the inconsistencies. He would point at objects and describe how they were not properly rendering, how the mathematical description of a chair or a table contained errors, contradictions that should cause them to cease existing. Reality is barely holding together, he wrote. The proof has shown me the cracks in the foundation. Everything is approximations, shortcuts, simplified equations that cannot account for the full complexity they purport to describe. We exist in an unstable solution, and awareness of that instability is causing it to collapse. Dr. Reinhardt was found dead in his study, his body arranged in a geometrically perfect spiral, every limb positioned at precisely calculated angles. On his desk was a note, I have optimized myself out of existence. The Scottish mathematician Andrew MacLeod took a different path. After studying the theorem, he became convinced that he could fix the error. He spent weeks developing what he called corrective mathematics, equations designed to stabilize reality, to patch the holes that Edmund's proof had revealed. His colleagues found him in his study, surrounded by papers covered in incomprehensible symbols that seemed to writhe and shift when looked at directly. MacLeod himself was still technically alive, but he no longer responded to any external stimuli. He simply sat, staring at his equations, occasionally adding a symbol or modifying a term. When they tried to remove his papers, he became violently agitated, the only emotion he still displayed. They left him there, tended by a nurse who was instructed not to look at his work. 6 months later, both MacLeod and the nurse were found dead. The nurse's diary revealed that she had eventually looked at the equations out of curiosity. They make sense, her final entry read. They make too much sense. I understand what he was trying to do. He was trying to think us back into existence. To use mathematics to retroactively justify our reality. But the problem is that the more you understand, the more you see that any justification is circular. We exist because we exist because we exist. There is no ground beneath us. We are falling forever, and only our refusal to look down keeps us solid. The Royal Society convened an emergency session. Of the 37 men who had attended Edmund's original presentation, 12 were dead. 8 were confined to asylums. 6 had fled to remote locations, hoping to escape the knowledge that pursued them. The remaining 11, myself included, proposed drastic action. "We must suppress this," Sir William Thornbury declared. His hair had gone completely white in the weeks since that fateful lecture. "Gather every copy of the proof. Destroy them. Kill the theorem before it kills us all." But how? Dr. Samuel Pritchard asked. He had developed a nervous tic, constantly checking his pulse to reassure himself that he still existed. The knowledge is already out there. In minds. In letters. In conversations. You cannot unthink what has been thought. "Then we must ensure no one else thinks it," I said. "We must warn every natural philosopher, every mathematician, every learned society. Tell them that Edmund Carlisle's theorem is poisoned, that studying it leads to madness and death." "They will not believe us," someone objected. "You know how we are. We will read it out of curiosity, to verify the danger for ourselves." "Then we must make them believe," Sir William said grimly. "We must make the consequences so clear, so terrible, that even the most curious will hesitate." And so began our campaign. Letters were sent across Europe, bearing the seal of the Royal Society, warning of a mathematical contagion of the mind. We described the symptoms, the deaths, the descents into madness. Some heeded our warnings. Others, as predicted, could not resist. The French mathematician Pierre de Montfort wrote back mockingly, "You English have always been superstitious. Mathematics cannot drive one mad. Only weak minds succumb to such fancies." 3 weeks later, de Montfort cut out his own eyes, claiming he could no longer bear to see the mathematical substrate of reality that was visible everywhere he looked. The German philosopher Gottfried Hahn published a paper arguing that our warnings were themselves a form of obscurantism, an attempt to suppress revolutionary knowledge out of fear. He died by his own hand 1 month after publishing his paper. His suicide note consisted of a single sentence: "I was right. The knowledge is revolutionary. It revolutionizes existence into non-existence." Edmund I tried to save. I visited him weekly, bringing food, attempting to pull him back from the abyss. But he had gone too far into the mathematical depths. "Do you know what the worst part is?" he asked me during one visit, his voice dreamy and distant. "The proof is beautiful. Absolutely, transcendently beautiful. It is the most elegant piece of mathematics ever conceived. And it proves that beauty means nothing. That elegance is arbitrary. That all the wonder and awe I have felt my entire life, the joy of discovering a perfect proof, the satisfaction of understanding, all of it is just chemical reactions pretending to be meaning. Edmund, you must fight this." "Fight?" He laughed bitterly. "How does one fight truth? How does one argue against a valid proof? Should I simply choose to believe something false because the truth is uncomfortable? If the truth destroys you, then yes. Then I am already destroyed," he said simply, "because I cannot unknow what I know. The proof is etched into my mind. I see it when I close my eyes. I feel it in every thought. I am the theorem, James. I am simply a process by which the equation examines itself." That was the last time I saw Edmund Carlisle alive. On the 17th of September, 1749, 3 months after Edmund's fateful presentation, the Royal Society made its final decision. The proof had to be buried. Not merely suppressed or discredited, but physically entombed where no one could ever find it. We gathered all known copies, 47 manuscripts in total. Edmund's original work, the letters he had sent, the elaborations and extensions created by those who had studied it. Each page was a death sentence, each equation a door into madness. The process of collecting these documents was itself perilous. Men who handled them too long, who read them too carefully while cataloging, began to exhibit the symptoms. 2 of our archivists had to be restrained after they started claiming they could see through the illusion of matter. Sir William proposed we burn them, but I objected. Fire might not be enough. And what if someone in the future with a stronger mind or better understanding could find a way to counteract the effect? Should we not preserve the knowledge somewhere, sealed away, for that eventuality? It was decided. We would inter the proof in a lead-lined box, sealed with every safeguard we could devise. It would be buried beneath the foundations of the Royal Society building itself, deep in the earth where no accidental excavation would disturb it. The night before the burial, I made one final visit to Edmund. I found him at his desk, writing. Always writing. His chambers were now completely covered in mathematics. Walls, ceiling, floor. Even the windows had been scrawled with equations. "James," he said without looking up, "I wondered when you would come. You wished to say goodbye. The proof is being buried tomorrow. Sealed away. With luck, it will never be found." "How very Catholic of you," he remarked. "Burying forbidden knowledge in sacred ground. The Enlightenment comes full circle back to superstition." "This is not superstition, Edmund. This is survival. Your theorem has killed 23 people. Driven dozens more insane. It must be contained." Finally, he looked up at me. His eyes, once so brilliant and full of life, were now empty, exhausted. "Do you know what I have been writing, James? I have been trying to find the error. Some flaw in my reasoning. Some mistake that would invalidate the entire proof. And there is none. The proof is perfect. Which means either reality is fundamentally broken, or our minds are not equipped to comprehend the truth of our own nature. Perhaps both." He stood slowly, moving like an old man despite his youth. "When you bury the proof tomorrow, you will not be burying mathematics. You will be burying a mirror. The theorem simply reflects what we truly are, patterns pretending to be persons, algorithms dreaming they are alive." I refuse to believe that. "Of course you do. You must. To believe it is to dissolve. And so you will bury the truth and go on living your comfortable lie. Perhaps that is wisdom. Perhaps the Greeks were right, and there are some things mortals were never meant to know." He returned to his writing, dismissing me with a wave. "Go, James. Bury your theorem. Pretend none of this happened. I do not begrudge you. But I cannot unknow what I know." I left his chambers with a heavy heart. As I reached the door, he called out one final time. "James, when future scholars find the proof, and they will, eventually, tell them this, the theorem is true. But truth is not always merciful, and enlightenment, taken to its logical conclusion, becomes a darkness from which there is no return." The next morning, we interred the lead box beneath the Royal Society foundations. A Presbyterian minister was brought in to say prayers, though several society members protested this return to religious ritual. But we were all desperate enough by then to accept any comfort, any protective magic, against the knowledge we were sealing away. As the final stone was laid, I felt something within me relax. The theorem was contained. The contagion had been stopped. Or so I believed. Edmund Carlisle died 1 week after the burial. He was found in his chambers, seated at his desk in a state of perfect repose. The physician who examined him could find no cause of death. His heart had simply stopped, as if the mathematics that animated his body had reached a conclusion and ceased calculating. On his desk was a final manuscript, not the theorem itself, but a warning. I have it here before me now as I write. To whoever finds this, you must understand that the theorem cannot be truly buried. Mathematics is not a human invention, but a discovery. The truths I have proven exist independent of my proof. They are eternal, necessary, unchanging. By suppressing this knowledge, you believe you are protecting humanity. But you are only delaying the inevitable. Someday, someone else will follow the same chain of reasoning. They will arrive at the same conclusion, and the cycle will begin again. The only hope, and it is a thin hope, is that future minds might be better prepared. that humanity might evolve to a state where such knowledge can be born. But until then, you carry a terrible burden. You know the truth. You understand what the theorem proves. And you must live with that understanding while pretending you do not. You must look at the world and see the mechanisms underneath, the gears and wheels of causality, while maintaining the fiction that there is something more. Something meaningful. This will drive you mad slowly, rather than quickly. It is a kinder madness, but a madness nonetheless. I am sorry, my friends. I thought I was illuminating the world. I did not understand that some truths are darkness visible. The Enlightenment was humanity's greatest achievement and its greatest mistake. We sought to banish superstition with reason. But we have discovered that reason, pursued far enough, leads to a place where even the self becomes superstition. God forgive us. We have thought ourselves into oblivion. That was 2 months ago. Of the 11 society members who participated in the burial, 4 have since died. Sir William Thornbury sits in his study, staring at nothing, occasionally mumbling about inherent contradictions. Dr. Pritchard has become addicted to laudanum, the only substance that quiets his mind enough to stop seeing the equations underlying everything. I persist.
Barely.
I write this account as a warning and as a confession. The theorem was true. I know it was true. I understood every step of the proof. And that understanding has hollowed me out, eaten away at the foundations of my sense of self until I feel like a mathematical ghost, a probability distribution temporarily localized in space. But I perform the motions of life. I attend society meetings.
I dine with friends.
I write papers on safe topics, astronomy, botany, anything but mathematics. I maintain the fiction of normalcy while feeling the truth eating away at me from within. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if Edmund was wrong. Perhaps the problem is not the theorem itself, but our inability to accept what it reveals. Perhaps a truly enlightened mind could grasp the proof and continue existing without contradiction. But I suspect not. I suspect that consciousness, by its very nature, requires a certain degree of self-deception. We must believe we are real, that our choices matter, that meaning exists. Without these necessary fictions, the mind simply dissolves. The Enlightenment promised that reason would set us free. And it has. It has freed us from our London, present day. Dr. Marcus Webb, professor of mathematics at King's College London, stood in the archive room of the Royal Society, holding a yellowed manuscript with trembling hands. He had spent 5 years researching the mysterious case of Edmund Carlisle, the brilliant mathematician who, according to fragmentary records, had died in 1749 under mysterious circumstances. Most documents about Carlyle's final work had been destroyed or lost, but Marcus had pieced together hints from correspondence, marginal notes, and oblique references. And now, after excavation work beneath the Royal Society building had uncovered a lead box sealed in 1749, he held the proof itself. "This is extraordinary," his assistant, Dr. Sarah Chun, said, looking over his shoulder. "Look at the sophistication of the mathematical language. This is decades ahead of its time. Centuries even." Marcus nodded, his eyes scanning the pages. The proof was indeed remarkable, a sweeping demonstration that unified seemingly disparate mathematical principles into a single, elegant framework. He began working through it, checking each step. The logic was impeccable, beautiful even. "Dr. Webb." Sarah's voice seemed distant. "Are you all right? You've gone very pale." He continued reading, following the chain of reasoning to its inevitable conclusion. His hands began to shake. The room seemed to tilt around him. "Marcus." Sarah grabbed his arm. "What is it? What does the proof say?" He couldn't answer, because he was starting to understand. Really understand. And with that understanding came a sensation of unreality, so profound that he had to grip the table to remain standing. The proof demonstrated. It showed if you accepted its premises, if you followed its logic, then... "No," he whispered. "No, this can't be right. If this is true, then we..." Sarah took the manuscript from his shaking hands and began to read. Marcus watched as her expression changed, first curious, then disturbed, then horrified. "This is impossible," she breathed. "This would mean that consciousness isn't that we're simply—" "Don't," Marcus said urgently. "Don't finish that thought. Don't internalize it. Just put the manuscript down and walk away." But he could see in her eyes that it was too late. She had understood. They both had understood. And understanding was irreversible. Marcus looked around his office, at the books on the shelves, the computer on his desk, the window overlooking London. Everything seemed thin now, translucent, like a simulation running on autopilot with no true substance beneath. He felt his sense of self beginning to fragment, just as the journal had described. Felt himself becoming a proof examining itself, a theorem contemplating its own validity. "We need to destroy this," Sarah said, her voice hollow. "Burn it. Bury it again. No one else can see this." Marcus nodded mechanically, but he knew, with terrible certainty, that it wouldn't matter. Because mathematics doesn't die. Truth doesn't burn. The theorem would be rediscovered. Again and again, throughout history, as human knowledge advanced. Each time, it would destroy the minds that comprehended it. This was the price of enlightenment. The cost of understanding. Some doors, once opened, reveal rooms we cannot survive entering. And Edmund Carlisle had opened them all. The manuscript you have just heard described has been resealed. The excavation site beneath the Royal Society has been filled in and cemented over. Dr. Marcus Webb and Dr. Sarah Chun have been hospitalized. Their conditions are listed as severe psychological trauma of unknown origin. The Royal Society has issued a statement declaring the discovered documents to be historical curiosities with no mathematical significance. But those of us who work in theoretical mathematics, we whisper among ourselves. We wonder what the theorem said. We are curious, as all scholars are curious. And we know that curiosity killed more than just cats. If you are a mathematician, if you study formal logic, if you work in any field that touches upon the foundations of reality, do not seek this proof. Do not try to reconstruct it from the clues in this account, because some knowledge is fatal. Some truths dissolve the minds that contain them. The Enlightenment taught us to question everything, to seek understanding through reason. But it never taught us what to do when reason reveals that we are nothing more than questions questioning themselves. Edmund Carlisle discovered the answer, and it destroyed him. Let his sacrifice be enough. Let the theorem stay buried. Because the alternative is enlightenment. True, complete, absolute enlightenment. And we are not ready for that light. We will never be ready.